Hi there. So I've tried this recipe before and it came out really delicious and everyone in the family really enjoyed it. It's for a cheese and spring onion soda bread. Now I apologise in advance because I'm likely to call it sourdough bread at some point. This is not a sourdough bread at all. It's just that during lockdown I have been making sourdough and in my mind I can't quite make the switch over to soda bread. First thing I've done then, I've preheated the oven to 180 degrees C fan, or 200 if it's not a fan electric, and to gas mark 6. I've also got a baking tray. I put some greaseproof paper on so that the bread doesn't stick to it. If you don't want to put baking paper on the tray, then you can just take a pinch of the flour that you would use and just sprinkle that over the top. I don't need to do that because obviously I've got baking paper which should stop it from sticking. Now, soda bread is a traditionally Irish type of bread, and so the nice thing with this is it doesn't need any bread flour. At the moment, bread flour is like trying to find hen's teeth in the shops. So 400 grams of plain flour is what you need for this one. Now, I've got prepared and ready to go before I start 125 grams of grated cheese and like a bunch of spring onions. If you don't have spring onions, that's fine, and just take a normal onion and chop it up quite finely. To prepare the spring onions, I've washed them and then I've taken off any outside leaves that are like a little bit sorry for themselves, chopped off the tiny root at the end and chopped till it starts going softer near where the leaves come off, and then those bits there I've just cut down into rings to make to prepare the spring onions. The next thing that I'm going to do then, I've got my onions and I've got my cheese ready. I'm going to start getting my dry ingredients together. I've got 400 grams of plain flour, like I said, and to that I'm going to add a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. My spoon's actually half a teaspoon, so I'm going to add 2 of those because I'm very nearly at the end of my bicarbonate of soda. When I went shopping the other day, it was easier to find bicarbonate of soda than baking powder, so it might just be not too difficult for me to find, hopefully. You then need a teaspoon of salt. I'm not going to measure this over the bowl just in case I have an accident and end up with the salt going into the bowl and too much of it going in. I'm not going to add exactly a teaspoon, I'm just going to go a little bit under because cheese is a very salty product. So that's gone in. Now the next thing that the recipe asks for is actually buttermilk. You may have buttermilk, that's great, you need 300 mils. If you don't have buttermilk, I have seen the suggestion that you can make your own buttermilk if you've got whole milk, the blue top milk, 300 mils of that with the juice from probably 2/3 of a lemon and stir it, it will make it your own buttermilk. However, a little tip for you is if you have 100 millilitres of milk and then 200 millilitres or grams of plain yoghurt. Now, I didn't have natural plain yoghurt in, but I had a natural set yoghurt in. So that's what I've got here, and I used half of it the other day when I made this recipe before. So I've got 200 grams then going in. I'll just use that all up. And I'm just going to give that a stir so that the milk and the yoghurt are combined. To this then, I'm going to start to gradually add the liquid into the dry ingredients. However, before I start doing that, I'm going to add probably about 3/4 of the cheese in, maybe just a little bit more of the cheese, and about 3/4 of the onions. I've just spotted some spring onions didn't quite get cut there. About 3/4, just maybe a little bit more than that of the onions go in as well. Give those a quick stir around so that they are mixed in. You don't end up with one very cheesy or oniony bit of bread. And then make a well in the centre, a little hole, and then add about 2/3 of your yoghurt milk mix. And then stir it with the knife that you've used to butter your bread. You are aiming for this to come together and to form quite a soft dough. Because this isn't using bread flour, you don't need to develop the gluten that's in bread flour. Again, keep adding gradually the milk and yoghurt mix until you make this into a soft ball of dough. Because we're not using bread flour, you don't have so much of the protein in it called gluten, and you don't need to develop it. To develop gluten, you need bread. But as there is no no point in developing gluten in this. There is no need for you to knead this bread. So it literally will come together as a soft ball, too soft to be able to knead, which is good because you don't want to knead it. You're going to shape it, put it onto a baking tray, and then it literally goes into the oven when you've glazed it and sprinkled the remainder of the toppings on, the flavourings on. So this is now making some quite large lumps, but I've still got little bits of flour at the bottom, so I'm actually going to add the remainder of this. Now it might be you even need to add a little bit more milk, that's okay, or it might be you don't need to add all of the yoghurt and milk mix. You need to just make sure that you get a dough that is soft and able to be brought into ball, which this just about is. I wonder if I might need a little splash more milk. Go. Right, I think that'll do. At this stage then, when it's formed really big lumps, I'm going to go in with my hand and just bring this together. And although we're not kneading it, we do need to bring it together. So it does need to form a ball. I can then get all those little bits of flour left in the bowl together, and I'm just going to bring it into a ball of dough. That holds together. So I want some of these bits here to go into it. So at this stage, I want to pat it out to sort of a roundish shape, and I want it to be quite a mound. I don't want it, I'm just going to get that a little bit softer. I don't want to knead it, but I do want it to come together. There we are, that's better. So I've made it into a ball. I'm going to flatten it ever so slightly, and then I'm going to put it onto a baking tray. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze this with a little bit of milk. This is just probably a tablespoon of milk. And this will help the flavourings to stick on top. You want to glaze before you stick your flavourings on top, otherwise you'll never be able to glaze, and the milk should make it go a nice golden colour. To that then I'm going to score it, make quite a deep cross right in the middle of this bread, and as the bread rises, which it will do because the baking powder will help it to rise, this cross will sort of open up and have the characteristic look of soda bread about it. I'm going to add in next the remainder of the onions. The idea of putting these on before the cheese is that the cheese hopefully will cover these as they melt, so the onions hopefully won't burn. I'm going to stick those on if they don't want to, because the milk acts like a bit of a glue. There's a few more bits of spring onion there. And then the cheese. I'm just going to sprinkle this on top and pat it on if I need to, and then get these bits of cheese off the base there and sprinkle those back on. Now this is then going to go into the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. What you're looking for is the bread to rise, to go golden brown, and when you take it out and tip the bread over, it should sound hollow when you tap it on the bottom. So that's how you're going to know it's cooked, and it will take between 30 and 40 minutes to do that. The other thing to say to you is you can absolutely put different flavours with this. So I was thinking actually I could do cheese, I could cook some bacon off, chop it up, and then we could have cheese and bacon bread. I've seen a recipe of soda bread which uses cheese and courgette, where you grate courgette, drain sort of squeeze out as much liquid of the courgette as possible, and then it would act a little bit like the onion but with a very mild flavour of courgette in there. But you could absolutely try different flavours in here. I'm going to put this into the oven now, obviously wash my hands because I've got flour and dough all over my hands, and I'll show you what this looks like when it comes out the oven. Thank you. So the soda bread's been cooking for about 35 minutes. I've gone to it when the timer went after 35 minutes, and as you can see it's really nicely risen. It's got a lovely golden brown colour on it. The cheese has melted, and the bits of spring onion on top have just gone a little bit caramelised and golden on there too. When I lift this up off the baking paper and tap it, you should be able to hear that it sounds hollow, which means that this is done and ready to eat. Now you need to let this cool down, and it's really difficult because I can't tell you, this smells phenomenal, and when we made it previously, it tastes absolutely amazing. So what I did last time was I waited till it had cooled down a little bit, I sliced it, and we had some for lunch. It's best eaten on the day that you make it, so if possible, sadly, you might have to try and eat it. You could try freezing it and then sort of toast it when you want it to come back and see if that will help to revitalise it. But like I say, best eaten on the day that you make it, and I can't tell you, this bread is pretty nice, it's pretty special. You want to have a go at this if you've got some plain flour in. Hope you enjoy it.